I'm joined now by Peter Ibbotson, who edited Panorama during the Thatcher years and who was a senior figure at the BBC, Channel 4 and indeed ITV. Peter, welcome. What do you think has happened to television?
It has grown up, it has got bigger, and it has changed due to an onslaught of technical, cultural and economic forces.
Do you think the internet will eventually kill off television?
No, it will extend it. I mean, television is only one means of getting pictures and sound from people to people, starting off from the very few to the very many, and increasingly from rather more people to still to the many. But in so doing, it is beginning to overturn, it's in the middle of overturning, all the models that appeared to work in the earlier stages.
What do you think has happened to the indies?
Well, I think there was enormous hope and expectation in the late 70s, early 80s, when the indie movement finally lobbied and got Channel 4, that it would break the economic monopoly and the transmission monopoly of the existing channels and allow 1,000 flowers to bloom. What it failed to recognise, and we probably all failed to recognise, was that the gatekeepers remained the broadcasters. So, as you yourself have noted, I mean, what happened was, in the end, to be successful, the indies had to accommodate themselves to the broadcasters and not the other way around.
What has happened to investigative television on terrestrial TV?
Well, it's dying I'd like to say slow lingering death. It seems to be rather a quick lingering death. Because it's very expensive, because in commercial television you don't have license conditions which require it as part of your right to broadcast, and because in a world of hundreds and hundreds of available channels, outlets, blogs, whatever, right across the scale, the ratio of paying viewers one way or another through license fee or through advertising subscription, the number of paying customers for the cost of making those kind of programs just becomes less and less economic.
Do the investigative teams exist anywhere in television today that could make the Birmingham Six or Death on the Rock?
I would never say absolutely not, but what they don't have is the continuity of outlets that used to exist, like World in Action, This Week, Panorama in its old days. I think Panorama has the potential for that, but the pressure is now on for journalism to be as entertaining as it is investigative. And for any program editor with a certain number of slots to fill a year and a limited budget, putting large chunks of that budget into investigations which may not bear fruit for months and years, if indeed at all, becomes a very, very serious risk.
What's happened to the BBC?
Well, the BBC, like all big public institutions, is going through its middle age and its late middle age. And what happens is, to put it crudely, nice middle class people, health administrators, educational administrators, local government, for all I know the MOD, but certainly the BBC, good, well-minded people go into these organisations, but they get bigger and bigger, the management structures get bigger and bigger, and in the end the interests of the institution begin to drive out the creative needs for which the organisation was founded. Now, I don't mean to be overly critical about that, but this is a process which is inexorable in all big institutions, and it is clearly happening within the BBC.
Should the BBC have exposed the MP's expenses scandal?
Of course.
Why didn't it?
I think the problem for the BBC is an innate caution, because in the end it only has one customer.
The government.
The government is the body, the customer, which decides what the income shall be. And that puts the BBC into two traps. The first trap is one of political caution, that one sees it over the long view. You remember back in the 70s when the kind of ideas of Keith Joseph, the precursors of Thatcher, were first bubbling up. Making programmes about that was thought to be slightly eccentric. And you remember we did make programmes about things like that. Move on into the kind of post-Thatcher era, and suddenly there's a new orthodoxy, and the BBC will move with it. I mean, partly just to move with the times and where the debate has gone to, but also with an eye to what the customer wants.
Do you think it was politically impossible for the BBC to do the MP's expenses scandal?
No, it would have caused enormous ructions, and I think it's not unreasonable. Well, sorry, it's an understandable calculation that if your customer is Parliament as a whole and the government in power, then to offend that customer mightily. The Telegraph did it. It didn't cost the Telegraph, and apart from buying the CDs a great deal, it wasn't an investment of huge investigative effort. I mean, it came to it, but very good for the Telegraph for publishing.
Do you think that the BBC's failure to do the MP's expenses scandal was a case of self-censorship?
I don't know the detail. I don't know whether those CDs were offered to the BBC. I don't know whether anyone saw what was on them, took a view, whether it was debated.
Yeah. Should the BBC have exposed phone hacking at News International?
Well, that's the other great... there are two great stories that not tabloid press, print press has done. One is The Guardian's pursuit on that story, and then the Sunday Times, now very topical, on FIFA. I mean, that requires dogged diligence, and the Sunday Times case being rebuffed time and time again, coming up with evidence of what was going on in the Qatar bid, etc., etc. And continuing to publish, continuing to tease away at it. I don't think the BBC is now constructed in a way in which it could allow individual reporters the time, the leeway, to run for months and years pursuing something like that. I mean, the nearest is probably the stuff Peter Taylor's done on Northern Ireland, but I don't see many successors to that.
Why? I mean, it's notable, isn't it, that the two examples we've just given were both broken by newspapers and not by the BBC. Yeah. Why is it that an organisation that's got an income of between £3 and £4 billion and has got at its core a public service remit, why is it the BBC can't organise itself to do those programmes?
Well, because a lot of television journalism has now become derivative. I see in your book you give due praise to the Today programme for being thoughtful and intelligent. Nonetheless, when you listen to it, you are aware that a lot of it has happened at 3 a.m, looking at the cuttings, looking at the diary, what are the stories of the day, and it does brilliantly sort of exegesis on stories which are being broken elsewhere. I'm not aware, and I may be wrong, that the Today programme does a whole lot of primary investigative journalism.
So television focuses on the visible, not the invisible.
And also the immediate. I mean, there are two things there. The picture is too often the driver. The example of, there's a great flood in Mexico, a child is rescued from a car in a swollen river, and you get a minute of it at the top of the news. It's absolutely dramatic, it's gripping. And then a very dull economic story will be second or third in the bulletin. Now, those are not, in global terms, or even national terms, the right news values.
They're picture values.
Well, they are picture values. And I think a lot of news becomes derivative, becomes cyclical. Also, before the technology took a grip, before satellite news exchange, it was possible, say on Panorama, to send out a team on a Tuesday to Israel to interview the Prime Minister, to do a roundup of whatever, and bring back a news story. News reporters would go to places around the world and spend 3 or 4 days putting together a report on something that hadn't been broken. Because all stories are now available as they break 24 hours a day, most of what happens in news is reacting to something someone else has reported. Now, this is not to say that television doesn't have incredible uses. It is a dramatic medium. It is very good at the interview. It's very good at the confrontation. Question time will run forever because it's got the immediacy, and it's also speaks directly to people.
Has the whole of UK television let down the victims of child sex abuse over 50 years?
Gosh, that's a very big and difficult question. Let's look at it. The word kinkora has been kicking around for, to my knowledge, 30 or 40 years. Did anyone do anything about it? No. Why? Impossible to penetrate, too difficult. And again, it's the waiting for someone else to blow the whistle. As for the Savile stuff, I mean, most of the people at the BBC even hadn't got an inkling of what was going on. And
on the failure to expose child sex abuse over 50 years, was one of the reasons, do you think, or maybe even the major reason, why it wasn't done by television, that you'd need a very specialist team of producers and researchers and so on, dealing with very damaged people, and that those teams have simply disappeared from British broadcasting?
I'm not sure they actually existed in that way. I mean, just thinking back to The Guardian and phone hacking and television, yes, it should be possible for a broadcaster to allow a very good reporter to be following and investigating a story of that sort whilst doing other things. The problem is with broadcasting, you've got from time to time to go and shoot an interview. It's not just putting something in a notebook, coming back to it. There is actually an expense of the physical process of maintaining the information you're gathering as you go along. I don't know.
Why do you think the BBC self-censored its own investigation into Jimmy Savile?
I think partly because Newsnight saw itself as a Westminster-based political programme, and this was sort of off its radar. It's something, well, I've been commissioned by the programme, but came in and they didn't really have a sense of how to handle it because it was outside its sense of its remit. But also because the BBC works in silos, and the light entertainment silo, call it what you will, very important audience driver and the rest of it, was seen as a force in the debate. Should you force the Savile tribute, the Christmas tribute thing off air? Now, what would have happened in an ideal world is that decision would have been taken above the silo. Someone saying, referred up, this is the issue. Should we transmit this? Corporate lawyer comes to see it. Someone advises the DG takes a view, and in a sane world, it would have gone out.
Do you think that subconsciously the BBC didn't want to believe it, and so therefore they didn't want to publish it?
I think there were probably huge legal risks involved, or perceived legal risks. I can't see inside other people's heads. There may have been a feeling that this was a can of worms which was too dangerous to open. I don't know. But the decisions, I think, should have been taken at the top, and should have been taken, if it were legally transmittable, it should have been transmitted.
Do you think that the BBC licence fee should be scrapped?
The problem with the licence fee, as I said earlier, is that there is one customer. The customer is the government. The great strength of the licence fee is that it allows for cross-subsidy, that you can take the great pot of money, 3 billion, whatever, and do not only the most entertaining and fun programmes that commercial broadcasters also do, but a fair amount of it also goes into more challenging stuff, music, arts, news, current affairs, whatever. That is not true forever, of course. I mean, one of the traps that the BBC falls into is, in order to please its customer, the government, it's inclined to say, look, We are doing programmes for the whole nation. We're not just elitist. But in doing so, it then starts to look at ratings too hard. To prove it's popular, it creates for itself the same, not economic straitjacket, but economic environment, quite often, that commercial television's working in. So that's why it has to be seen to beat ITV on this, that and the other, or to be within shouting distance in this genre or that genre. So instead of having the freedom of cross-subsidy, I think it sometimes wastes it. Now, whether the licensee should continue, for some time I've thought it would be interesting to look at subscription models. That, if the BBC is so valuable to the public, news and whatever, presumably, it could be market tested, a very large number of people will continue to pay it. Technology would allow it now to be a subscription model, keep out people who don't pay, in order to get the things they want. The danger then, of course, would be you would exacerbate the mimicking of the full market. That in order to drive more and more subscriptions, you do more and more popular and less demanding programmes. I mean, you'd have to be very, very careful what mix of programmes you thought was going to maximise your income.